I know, squeaky wheel gets the oil, but this wasn't what I wanted. I sure as hell didn't want to return to old Sullivan. I had left that small little town when I went off to serve my country in the United States Marine Corps right after high school. My friend David said I'd be back. They always come back, my friend. He wasn't wrong. After 8 years, 1 combat term in Afghanistan, and a messy divorce from a San Diego native, I find myself back in Sullivan, living in all places my parents' garage. It wasn't too bad though. Dad had converted the detached garage to an apartment a few years back to help supplement his retirement. The old drafty structure gave me a lot of privacy I wouldn't have normally had I taken up living in my old room at the homestead. Sullivan hadn't changed much, but that wasn't new. The town hadn't changed since the 1930s. It was strange to me, even now when I think about it, that a town as big as Sullivan, located here in rural Montana, didn't get the attention cities like Great Falls or Helena got. All the businesses and restaurants were locally owned and operated. We didn't have a McDonald's or a Walmart. We did have a Dottie's Diner and Truck Stop, which had a small casino inside. We had J. Lawson's Mercantile, which had everything you could think of and more. With a population of 10,234 people, you'd think someone would have heard of Sullivan. However, nobody seemed to pay it any mind, and that was the beauty of Sullivan. Even though we welcomed in the stray passerby, the town was unsullied by modern-day hustle and bustle and the rest of the world faced. It was as if the town was caught in a perpetual time capsule. Anyways, when I returned home, it was my buddy David that helped me to pick up the pieces of my life. He offered me the dream job of any lifetime nerd. Working in his comic book store he had just opened downtown next to Hook's Pharmacy. Although I hadn't been collecting in a long while, I still followed Marvel and DC, and I could talk Star Wars all day long. Dark Star Comics, it had it all. If you wanted comics, we carried every mainstream and independent comic around. Plus, we had a huge selection of vintage comics, some worth thousands of dollars. Action figures, we had new and old. We sold video games, we sold movies, vintage movies from Japan. We had a large selection of role-playing games and card games to choke a horse with. It was an honest-to-God's nerd's haven. And since opening, we never had a shortage of customers, which was amazing considering Sullivan was such a small town, and David had made me part owner. I didn't know quite what to say. Don't worry about it, Jay. What are friends for? I did worry about it. David and I had grown up together, and there was a point when I even saved his life from drowning in the Missouri River. Maybe that's the reason he gave me the spot. Or maybe it's because he felt sorry for me when I left the Marines. I lived in San Diego with my wife, Casey. I worked for the port, and one night after a long day's work, I'd found Casey with another man. My boss, in fact. I beat that man within every inch of his life. Needless to say, I lost my job, and I was divorced 6 months later. David would open the store up at 8 a.m., and once I was trained up and ready, I'd close the store at 8 p.m. Or rather, I closed after the D&D Club finished their campaign for the night. It wasn't a hard job. Run the register, check the inventory and the stock, restock when needed, sweep, clean up, take out the trash, lock the door on the way out. There was one rule, though. Whatever you do, don't go into the basement after 10 p.m. The landlord made it part of the lease. He doesn't want anyone down there after 10. It was an odd request, to say the least. But I didn't want to go down into that spooky old basement anyway. Even during the day, it was like walking into a crypt. Only one light ever seemed to work, so it was constantly dark and dreary, like something out of a bad horror film from the 1980s. I don't think the basement liked me very much either. One day, the door crashed behind me, leaving me locked down there. David hadn't left yet and was waiting for me to come back up, so I wasn't down there for very long. But it caused me some nightmares for a few weeks after the incident. Other than that one little thing, working at the shop was wonderful. I'd never had so much fun working one day in my entire life. I'd come in at noon. We'd close up shop and go to Dottie's for lunch. Around 4 or 5, David would go home and spend time with his family. And I'd handle things up until all the RPers left. And I was usually out about 11 p.m. It was routine. One night, after a very intense group of D&D players finished their campaign for the night, I began my normal routine. But something felt off. There was a coldness to the air, which in summertime was really quite odd, even for Montana. There was almost an electric quality to the air. And the hairs on my arm instantly stood on edge, like my time in combat in Afghanistan. It's like I could feel eyes all around me. Like every comic book and every action figure, everything with a face on the cover. It's like they were watching me. And that's when I heard the whispers for the first time. Thousands of disembodied whispers. I could barely make them out. I turned slowly with my trusty broom in my hands, and yes, I can confirm that every action figure on the shelf was watching me intently, as if little demons had possessed them. Every uncovered book followed me with their eyes. A loud crashing bang came from the stairway to the basement. I ran over, looked down using my broom like it was a rifle or something, looked down the stairwell in horror. An eerie red light glowed from around the doorway, and it seemed as if it was calling me. Fuck that! I ran out of that store, got my car, dialing David all the way down the road. Jay, what's wrong? You okay? No, man. I'm a block away from the store. Something freaky's going on, man. Okay, well, meet me there. I'll be there in a few minutes, okay? I am not going back in there. Where you at? I'm over at the Mercantile. Okay, I'm on my way. Don't go anywhere. It didn't take David 5 minutes. I told him about everything that had happened. I had explained everything about the whispers, the door. He sympathized with me well enough, but I could tell by his eyes he wasn't convinced. And there was me, an adult, a Marine, terrified of whatever it was that was behind that door. Kind of began feeling a little ashamed of myself. We went back to the store. There was nothing out of place. There were no whispers, no figures watching, no red behind the basement door. You know, it could have been the fluorescent lights. They've been known to play tricks on the mind, you know. And, well, let's be honest, you haven't taken any time for yourself since you started. I know what I saw, and I know what I felt. Okay, calm down, man. I believe you. Look, I appreciate the opportunity you've given me here, but I can't work here anymore, man. Not after that tonight. I'm still shaking. Look at me. Look. Don't quit, man. Don't quit. I'll close the store. Well, we talked for another couple of hours, and David finally convinced me to stay. He'd take my shift, and I'd open the store in the morning. And things were awesome again. A whole year went by, and the memory of that night had all but crept out of my mind. One day, David needed the night off, so he asked me if I'd cover for him just that one time. And, of course, I was reluctant at first, but David was my best friend, and nothing had happened to him the whole year. I could suck it up for one night. We closed very late that night, though. It was about 1 in the morning when I began cleaning. All was fine until that feeling crept back into my soul. And those whispers came again. I fell to the floor in a fetal position and held my head tight, trying to keep the noise out. It seemed to move, and that only seemed to anger me. And the angrier it got, the more courage it seemed to build up. It felt like I did in Afghanistan again. Like a badass Marine, a fighting machine, twice as ugly and twice as mean. I stood up, grabbed that broom from the broom closet, and headed down to the basement stairwell. Cautiously, I made my way down the stairs, making as little sound as I could possibly make. I slowly opened the door to the basement and was in total shock at what I saw. The room was alight with torches, and there was a pentagram that had been painted in the center of the room. There were people in red robes standing around this pentagram, and the pentagram pulsed with the torchlight, almost as if there was an invisible presence reaching out to the real world. And all the whispers that I had heard, they were coming from it. My God! It was the spirits of the long-dead people of this town. I turned to leave and was confronted by a man in red robes. It was David. But he had no eyes. He smiled at me with cruel, evil smile and pushed me to the center of the room, to the center of the pentagram. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to honor the life of J. Hammond.